So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining the Modern CFO show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on as a guest speaker today. Just to kick things off, it'd be great if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the fabulous things that you guys are doing over at Agility at the moment in 2025.
Well, thank you for having me, Zach. Yeah, my background over the past 25 years has really been focused on physical operations with 10 years at large enterprise manufacturing companies like Gillette, Bristol Myers Squibb, General Electric as well, both in finance and operations roles. And throughout my career, really, I would say the focus has been disruptive technology and where that intersects with physical operations. And so I joined Agility Robotics. It's a humanoid robotics company back in December of 2024. And really, our focus is bringing humanoids into the industrial sector where there are major gaps in labor shortages, not only in the US, but really across the world as we see decline in populations and really people choosing alternative types of work. And so at Agility, we're really focused on a few key areas. Those areas are warehousing and logistics, as well as manufacturing, and really, again, filling the gap where human capital has not been available to allow those industries really to continue to serve the general population. Largely, as I say, in manufacturing, e-commerce, fulfillment, those are the areas where we're seeing a lot of need for additional labor.
Right, I see. I mean, obviously, this is something that's been kind of going on for quite a few years, but it seems like you guys are really kind of leading this whole robotics industry. And it's great to kind of see where this is even going to go in the next few years. Where is it going to be rolled out in every warehouse across the states? And it's the start of something fabulous, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think humanoids have really come into the spotlight very recently with a lot of quick, accelerated progress in the areas of AI and other areas as well. But agility has really been, to your point, at the forefront. Really, the company was founded over 10 years ago, and it was founded initially from the Oregon State University's engineering lab, the robotics lab, really to understand and study locomotion in animals and to simulate that in a robotic way. And so the early product of agility really had no torso, it had no head, and so it looked very different than the humanoids that you see today. And really, the focus was serving R&D type applications, academia at large for research and development. And that product really has evolved now into what you see the focus we have over the past 2 years to really fill again that industrial labor void, if you will. And so, thanks to the traditional control stack, the robotic technology that really was critical and the baseline of our product, now with layers of what you see in terms of simulation data, AI technology, really now again leading us to be able to perform valuable work for our customers today.
Mm. I mean, obviously, it's interesting to see, I think with this whole AI kind of revelation that's going on, I think there's always arguments for both, but it just seems like AI is not exactly going to take over all human operations, but it's there to aid 100%. Like I can see from an outside perspective in a huge warehouse, where there's no, from employees' perspective, coming in late, no insurance or damages, zero room for error, and it's kind of just going to be there to be a huge aid over the next few years, which is going to be interesting.
Definitely. And I'm glad that you brought up the idea that AI is not a black box solution for everything. We've seen tremendous progress in automation, in robotics, and in AI over the past few years. And so, really, in order to stay ahead, I think you really need to understand and evaluate as the evolution in AI and simulation tools begin, where is there an ability to integrate those into your product where it's accurate, scalable, and repeatable? Because, there are a lot of humanoid companies and companies at large, honestly, that I think are looking at AI as the solve all. And I think that's still quite a ways away. And so I think selectively choosing where to integrate those technologies strategically is important. And that will evolve over time, and you can begin to pull more and more of that reliability on that technology in. But today, to presume that, as you call out, it's going to solve everything, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not going to happen that way, of course. It's going to be over time that it slowly starts to adapt and expand and, take over little things that may be mundane and just really help out overall. I know at the
Absolutely.
start of our call there, you mentioned about being involved in physical operations from a finance perspective. So I wanted to know your take on this. I mean, in 2025, we've seen the CFO role adapt and expand into other roles like your HR, for example, a little bit of recruitment as well. And you talk openly about being a CFO that's, in tandem with physical operations. What's the benefit of being a more hands-on CFO for you?
This is really black or white for me. I think in order to have the most impact in a business, the CFO must be integrated in the business. That means understanding the levers at a very granular level to be able to drive the impact from a financial perspective. So, throughout my career, and again, I mentioned that I've been in physical operations, largely manufacturing, logistics, fulfillment over my 25 years. And really, throughout the career, that has meant walking out into the manufacturing floor, going out on delivery routes with the drivers delivering your packages, and really understanding operations at the same level as the COO. And in my career, those two things have gone hand in hand. That's what's allowed me really to be able to transition as well between those two roles with relative ease. For CFOs that are not embedded in the business, I guess I would ask, why not? There's only an upside to being able to get into the business at that level. And again, I think the impact you can drive in doing so is far greater than just looking at the financials and data purely, not alongside the strategic aspects and components of that operation.
100%. I think like I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think we've all seen it over the years where you have not just in CFO but people in leadership and management positions where they perhaps get a little bit stuck, maybe a little bit lazy to maybe go and get involved with the rest of the team. And I think like you hit the nail on the head. You can only benefit in getting in the weeds, understanding all of the processes because then you've got a holistic view of what needs to be changed, what's a report back to the board. There's only benefits that can come from that really.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm naturally curious, so I love to just learn more. And so I think, that obviously feeds that for me as well, which is just constant learning and thinking about new ways to do things. So I think that is for me a strong passion that drives a lot of the way I think about, leading a business and really driving an impact, as I mentioned, financially.
Yeah, and also I guess along that journey of being inquisitive, you're getting to talk to staff members maybe you've not had an opportunity to talk to before, hearing their pain points directly, like in front of somebody. It's not just a mundane task of, an email or, a bit of text. You're really getting in front of the people that actually matter.
Absolutely. And that is something that I always encourage. I mean, when you're actually out on a manufacturing floor, if you are talking to the people that actually are doing the work, I think you will gather so much information and insight on really where they see the largest opportunities that behind your desk, if sitting in corporate or wherever you may be, you just won't have the opportunity to come to understand. And so I think talking to people that are actually producing and performing the jobs that are the backbone of a company is really where you'll glean the biggest insights within the business.
100%. I think there's no other way that you'd be able to get that kind of knowledge without being in front of people. I also see that in terms of when you're in a smaller company, I guess it's a bit easier to do that. But when you're at a huge corporate giant like Amazon, which I know you worked for many years and really helped turn around their processes, I wanted to ask what has working at a company like Amazon, for nearly 10 years taught you about, running a business and running a really tight shipping operations that can be applied to those smaller businesses. So the things that you've seen for this corporate giant, what can then be applied to a smaller business in that same logic?
I think the biggest learning that I captured in my time at Amazon is really that making bets that are two-way doors is okay. Meaning sometimes you're not going to have the data. And as much as it pains me because I'm very data oriented, there will be situations where you don't have data to make a decision. In this case, I think ensuring that you understand the implications of making a decision and favoring two-way door options. And what I mean by that when I say is at times speed will be critical. So learning hard and fast on where you need to bring the business, I think is important. And so understanding what decisions you can take that if the plan does not or the outcome does not actually generate the expected outcome, you back out and basically start again, right? And so I
Mm.
think making bets that are two-way doors is important. Learning quick and hard, and then reverting when things don't pan out, also important. And I think that will help you accelerate towards your goals. So I think that is probably the biggest lesson learned at my time at Amazon is just feeling comfortable in doing that. Obviously, assessing the risk profile in doing that, but doing that quickly and bringing the business forward.
Exactly that. And would you also say that within that time at Amazon, is there any other lessons that it kind of taught you that maybe you've not had exposure to from other companies? Being one of the largest businesses in the world, is there any of those operations that you've seen firsthand that you think could be applied to maybe other businesses, maybe Agility or elsewhere?
Definitely. And so I think, this is probably one of the reasons that I am at Agility now. And I think a lesson learned is learning where you can automate operations can drive a tremendous outcome. And this is again why I'm a big proponent of robotics, automation at large. When I was at Amazon, I was part of the Kiva robotics integration team. And what we saw when we integrated that type of automation and robotic technology into the business, not only cost savings, of course, which was the expected outcome, but just how that changed people's ability to focus on things that had additional value in the operation was tremendous. Folks that worked in the fulfillment centers previously, before we integrated that technology, walked 13 miles a day each shift to pick and pack products that you and I were ordering on our buy now button. When we integrated that technology, those people were able to focus on larger value add operational dynamics within that business and really left, as you mentioned previously, the mundane, repeatable tasks to the automation. And so I think that can be applied, obviously, at different levels of scale, but across many businesses, looking for opportunities to automate to then allow your team to focus on more value add opportunities, I think is a lesson that every size and scale of business can look to achieve.
I mean, it's like it seems like we're still very early in this automation game, in the AI game, and obviously, like we said earlier, it's been around for 10 years. But I think you've just mentioned there, we're seeing it firsthand now, really start to be implemented, and companies are starting to see the benefits. Whether it's robotics and humanoids like Agility, or whether it's a bit of software, for FP&A, I think people
That's
are
right.
starting to really get into this AI piece now. And I wanted to ask from your perspective, like how do you see robotics and AI evolving even further in the next 5 years? Like, what would you say that CFOs have to do now to stay ahead from someone who's so close to the industry?
Yeah, I think in order to stay ahead, I would ensure that CFOs understand the roadmap of their company to utilize those technological advancements, but even specifically within their teams, how they can leverage those advancements to improve their output. And so at Agility, we take a very pragmatic approach. I mentioned previously, it was founded 10 years ago, a focus on hardware, traditional controls. With the evolution of AI and simulation tools, we've really strategically begun to layer those tools on top of traditional controls. The same is true in finance from a CFO perspective. What are the processes that you and your teams have created where integrating certain components of AI or additional tools that have been developed over time, where does that make sense? And again, it's not a hands off the wheel type of decision, as we mentioned earlier, but really, I think strategically layering those tools on top of existing processes to either drive additional accuracy, speed, or robustness to be able to sustain scalability. I think those are all areas that I would urge every CFO to take a look at. I think strategically choosing what areas to interject that not only into the business, but again, finance, accounting functions is important for us to continue to grow and scale. But again, as we just spoke about, it'll also allow your team to do additional value add work that otherwise they may not be able to if they're running transactional processes rather than thinking about the next strategic opportunity that we can take as a business. And so that's where I think I would certainly focus. And that's where I try to keep my mind really in balance between what needs to be done today, what can we do to improve those processes, and where do we interject that technology to allow us to grow and scale more quickly.
I also think sometimes, I mean, I even know this as a business owner, kind of having multiple hats. Sometimes you have a process that could be a bit outdated, but you're just so used to it, it's you don't even think about it. But there really could be other solutions there. You know, whether it's in a warehouse implementing something like the Agility offers, or like I said earlier, a new bit of software for the more novice finance leader in the AI realm. Is there any way that people can kind of get started? Is there a starting point that you think that people should be looking at, whether it's a chat GPT, looking at some kind of automation on software? What would you say is a good starting point for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy as you're calling out to become used to processes as they are today. And so, we spoke earlier about talking to the people that actually are doing the work. So I would say I would encourage everyone to talk to their team, find out where are their struggles, where are their slowdowns or obstacles in their way to be successful. And I think certainly looking at new ways of doing things, to your point, whether that's a new software system that has come out, whether that is integrating some AI, certainly Chat GPT, I think, and exploring that as a tool is definitely helpful. And I think, that's a good basic fundamental building block, certainly, for everyone to get to know. And I think, understanding technology as it's developing will help us all improve again, and maybe not in financial processes. I don't suggest using Chat GPT to build your budget for next year, but I do think integrating that into certain key elements of the business makes a lot of sense.
Exactly that. And I know there's going to be easier routes, like, using software is going to be a little bit easier than doing something like you guys are doing at Agility. But on that point, I wanted to ask, from your perspective in your industry, I think robotics is quite a capital intensive industry. It's not as simple as making a new hire and all of a sudden you've got a new industry. We're talking about a lot of R&D and investment. So I wanted to ask how you guys at Agility approach budgeting for R&D and manufacturing in quite a new and niche industry, because it must be a challenge to evaluate ROI on projects that may not pay off, straight away, maybe even in 2 or 3 years' time.
No, absolutely. And you're correct. Hardware businesses are capital intensive. That is absolutely true. And having been in the hardware-based business for years, I think the critical path to success is ensuring that your product roadmap allows for two things. As you call out, looking at the ROI for our customers, but also looking at the margin for our business and making sure that we're adding value while adding a positive implication to the business. And so at Agility, again, we've been in business for 10 years, and there are a lot of humanoid companies out there who are quite good at PR, who are talking about, that AI black box moment and going into the home. We think that's the wrong approach. And so as the finance leader of this business, the pragmatism and the approach that we're taking really is, where can we begin adding ROI today to generate the revenue to then allow for, as you're calling out, the evolution of additional skills as it may be with our product called Digit. And
Mm.
so I think, for us, while hardware is certainly capital intensive, we are looking to add that ROI to customers. Most enterprise level customers are looking for a sub 2 year payback when they look at investing in whether it's machinery equipment or humanoid robots as an example. And so we do ensure that we have a path not only to provide that ROI to our customer, but also that we have an accretive margin position for us to be able to then, as we're talking about, continue to progress on the evolution and development of our skill set with Digit and our product roadmap. And so I think, ensuring that you have a viable BOM cost is absolutely critical, and that you understand what levers within the business you need to pull to be able to get that cost of BOM, if you will, to a point where you're driving that, again, ROI for your customer and the margin that you need to sustain your R&D activities to continue your NPI development as well. I think it's easy to look at budgeting and say, hey, we can only afford to do this. But that would be fairly short-sighted. You need to have, especially in this world, and you call it a niche market, I would say this technology is quickly evolving. And so being on top of what additional technological breakthroughs we can integrate into our product is critical for our long-term success. And so we can't just look short-sighted at what can we do today, but it's really what are we doing to ensure that in 6, 12, 18 months time, we continue to hold that competitive moat that we've developed by having come to this industry quite some time ago.
Mm. So I guess it's like you say, some companies may set aside some kind of budget and say, this is what we have to play with within the next 3 months, and we'll get to where we can. But what you guys are doing is really pushing the boundary to make sure you get to that end goal, and make sure that there's a balance between the ROI and R&D, and having a balance all over, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's critical to ensure that you are making progress. If you have a product offering and it's static, certainly the industry and technology around you will not be static. It'll
Mm.
outpace you as a business. And so I think allocating the right amount of funding towards those continuous developments and new product releases is absolutely essential to long-term success in this industry.
I guess it's like you say, if you're a leader, you need to make sure that you're staying a leader. You need to constantly be innovating. Otherwise, there's going to be someone
That's
else around the corner that's going to get there before you. And we've
that's
seen that in all
exactly right.
different kind of industries. On a kind of side note, I know that in your career, you were a finance manager, obviously before coming a CFO. And I wanted to ask you if you could go back in time, what advice would you give for aspiring financial directors and CFOs to fast track their career? Because I'm sure you've seen it all.
Well, it's a good question. I would say there's three things I would encourage finance managers, people that are more junior in their finance career. This is no surprise based on our conversation. Understand the business, ask a lot of questions, and maybe the third one that I would articulate has been important to me, and I encourage even folks that I'm, discussing and mentoring and coaching, say yes to new opportunities. That might sound like an afterthought, but I think a lot of times we try to ensure that we meet 100% of the criteria of a role before saying yes to new opportunities. And
Mm.
by default, I think that actually puts us back in terms of our ability to progress. And so I think, when you're offered a new opportunity within a business, even if you have, some thought that perhaps you don't meet 100% of the criteria, if you have enough of the fundamental foundational elements to be successful in that role, say yes. At one point in my career, I was asked to move to Europe as an example when I was with Amazon. And there was a business problem, and the business problem ultimately was that we had to stand up a last mile delivery operation in order not to pull down our retail volumes. And the question that was asked to me in that instance was, hey, will you move to Europe? Will you take on this challenge of starting up a new operation? And I remember recalling, well, okay, I can do this. I've never actually developed a last mile operation in the past, but I've built businesses within four walls, and I'm going to take that challenge head on and really see how we can help the business continue to grow. And that opportunity for me, I would say, was kind of the tipping point in my career. And so again, to folks that are thinking about how do I track my career, say yes, take on new challenges, take what you've learned over the course of your experience and career and apply it to those new opportunities. And yes, there is a learning curve with every new role, but I think truly you have to be uncomfortable in order to grow in your career. And those moments are the ones that really will, again, set your trajectory as you move forward. And it's fun, right? Challenging and scary perhaps at times, but that's where the real learning and development's happening.
Exactly that. And I think it's actually amazing that you said that, because I think back to how many countless amazing individuals that I've met that I believed in them maybe more than they believed in themselves. And I think sometimes, like, people buy from people, and 90% of any leadership role, and correct me if I'm wrong, is really personality and in your confidence. So even if you're a finance controller that maybe doesn't meet all of the tick boxes on paper, it doesn't mean that you
Mhm.
don't know how to actually be in that role and be confident with it, you know?
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned, I think the network that you have around you is very important. To your point, you've seen individuals who you believed in perhaps more than they had believed in themselves. And I think there's a lot that happens within a career network where that is true. And I think looking to those mentors, coaches, advocates in your career is always something that will help you come to better understand maybe where your development opportunities are, where your strengths are, where you should take those career risks. And so I think that is an important point not to overlook is ensuring that you have that network around you who can call you out and challenge you in ways that maybe you won't challenge yourself.
Exactly that. And I know earlier in our conversation you mentioned briefly about mentorship.
Mhm.
And I know it's sometimes, I had this conversation recently with a good friend of mine, and I think in the position that he was as a CEO, he almost felt a little bit like he doesn't need mentoring. The ego kicked in a little bit, and I know you're quite a big advocate of mentorship. What's your advice and your belief in mentorship in 2025? And what I wanted to ask, what's it brought you in the last few years to help develop your career?
Yeah, definitely. We always are learning, right? And so for me, I mentioned I'm naturally curious, but I get bored very easily. And where I'm not being challenged and learning, I start to think I need to go and do something else. And so for me, mentoring and even providing just career guidance has been really instrumental, not only for me personally, but I have mentored a number of folks where I've seen them grow and develop. And you mentioned the CEO who maybe thinks they no longer need mentoring. I think we all need someone again who's going to really help push us and challenge us. And mentoring and coaching looks different over different stages of your career. And so even today, for me, one of the big things that I look for in my career is who do I see within the professional environment and business structure here that I can learn from? And that was one of the main reasons, in addition to the product and the disruptive technology that Agility has, was I saw a leadership team that I could learn from. And having a female CEO in a technology driven business for me was something that was really, really exciting. And so I would say to folks, continue to surround yourself with people that will teach you, will challenge you. I think that again, we think about ourselves in a certain light, but other people perceive us differently. And so getting that feedback, getting that coaching is important. I think having an unbiased sounding board also to run career questions by with someone is also important. And so I guess for 2025, my goal is to continue to learn, to continue to be challenged by the leaders around me, and to also continue to help those folks that do look for career guidance. I view my role as the CFO and operations leader for Agility to, of course, be to drive those parts of the business, but it's also to develop my team. And when you look at businesses that are in hyper growth, high scalability, one of the biggest challenges I would say is to carve time to develop the team. But as the business is growing, you want to ensure that the team that is a part of that business is growing at the same speed. So you don't have to overhire as the business grows, but rather you can develop the people within to take on those expanded roles as the business grows and scales so they can take on other challenges within the business. And so for 2025, that's my focus, for me to continue to learn, for me to continue to challenge myself, and to continue to develop my team at the scale of the business's growth so that we can continue to support the business and not become the bottleneck to that ability to grow.
Yeah, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand to what you said earlier. If you want to fast track your career, there's all of that stuff you can do, but at the same time, like get advice, have a great network around you. I think sometimes we always forget that we're like a summary of the people around us. If you've got great
Exactly.
people around you, just be open minded, I guess, and you'd end up learning from the best of us.
Absolutely.
I wanted to finish off on a bit of a quick fire round. I
Yes.
wanted to kindly ask, what's one book or podcast you think for this year or any year really that every CFO should be checking out?
I drive often to our RoboFab factory in Salem, Oregon, and so I've been catching some podcasts on my drive, and one that I really have come to love is The Diary of a CEO. And I just love the different content. I love hearing different stories, and so I'd encourage people to check out that. The other one, and this is maybe a little more personal, maybe less professional, but certainly goes into the professional realm, which is the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I've really come to appreciate just really understanding how to let people make decisions and choices on their own. And, for me in my career, really looking towards letting go of the minutia and just focusing on the high level strategic areas has been something that I constantly need to check myself against. So, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, it's a book, but also featured in many podcasts, is super interesting.
Oh, perfect. I've never actually heard of that one, but I'll make sure to check it out tonight for sure. What is one tip to remain focused in those like long planning sessions, or just when you really need an hour to smash out a lot of work? What's one tip that you can share with us?
Well, this might seem funny, but it's really to ensure that you don't have any distractions. And I personally love to listen to music that is really helping me to focus and get a job done. So it's usually upbeat music to really just kind of shut everything out, focus on a task at hand and get it done. So that's my tip.
Perfect. I'm honest. I wish I could be one of those people. Unfortunately, I listen to the more heavy metal end of music, so sometimes when I find I'm putting that on, I end up distracting myself. But I wish that was me, honestly. What's some of your favorite software that you like to use at the moment? This is on could be anything.
This may be somewhat sales pitchy, but I will say it because I think the team has put a tremendous amount of work in it. But my favorite software right now, we offer a fleet management software tool called Arc that allows our customers really to be able to control Digit and their fleet of humanoid robots. But not only the robots, how they interact with other pieces of automation in the facility. So I'll give a shout out to our Arc platform, which is a software that I'm really proud of and I think delivers tremendous amount of value to our customers.
Perfect. And on that note, if anyone wants to check out more about Agility, more about Arc, and all the amazing things that you guys are doing, what's the best place that we can go and check out Agility? Website? Is there any way to contact you? LinkedIn, email?
Absolutely. So I would encourage folks to certainly take a look at our website, which is agilityrobotics.com. We post a lot of content on our LinkedIn page as well, live footage from some of the shows, the industry shows that we've been at this year. Certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to share more about Digit and humanoid robots.
Perfect. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I'm sure the audience is going to learn 101 things from today's show. So I do thank you once again, and make sure you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. Have a good day.